Hello and welcome fellow otakus, it's the Heavenly Weeb here and welcome back to another video. Today we are back with episode 2 of the Villain Mastermind series, the series where we discuss the greatest anime villains of all time. Last time on episode 1 I talked about potentially the greatest villain in One Piece, so if you haven't already, go and check that video out. This week's villain is also another great villain, and he's from the New Gen era. So if you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to help support the channel, and remember to comment which anime villain you want to be featured on the next episode of the Villain Mastermind series. Today the villain I'll be discussing is Fyodor Dostoevsky from Bungou Stray Dogs, who plays the ultimate antagonist in the series and a personal favorite of mine. In a world where gifted people have abilities, where some choose to be good and others choose to be evil, Fyodor is an ability extremist that wants to purge all those who have abilities, and he is the ultimate cornerstone standing in the way of all three main factions that are either trying to protect or attack Yokohama City: the Armed Detective Agency, the Port Mafia, and the Guild, before they were disbanded. And at some point, Fyodor invaded Yokohama with his own underground organization, the Rats in the House of the Dead, and infiltrated the Guild from the inside and destroyed them from the inside out, which he did because the Guild failed to eliminate the other two factions of Yokohama. After they proved they weren't able to defeat the two prime factions, Fyodor decided to steal all the Guild's funds and take care of them himself with his loyal followers from the Rats in the House of the Dead, as he was going to betray them eventually. And that set in motion his original plan to exterminate both remaining factions. And the way he went about doing this was to poison both Yukichi Fukazawa, leader of the Armed Detective Agency, and Ogai Mori, the leader of the Port Mafia. And the special poison he used on the two leaders was uncurable, unless one of the two leaders died, in which case the other would be cured. The reason he used a poison like this was to put both factions under a circumstance where if either group wants to save their leader, they have to kill the other group's leader, which eventually started an all-out war in Yokohama. He did this for two main purposes. One was to play a sick game with all the gifters and show them how truly sinful they are and how easily they can be manipulated from the outside. The other and more important reason he was eliminating both factions was to reach his one main goal in the series, and that is to find the book, a special ability book which has the power to make anything written on it become an instant reality. And he wants to use the infinite power of this book to create a world with no abilities, whether it is in the past or in the future. Basically, a world without gifters. The reason behind his obsession is that he believes that all humans are sinful and those sins originate or have some relation to abilities. So he wants to exterminate them all. And this arrogant and dark nature is what gave him the title of demon in the past. But in a world where there is a constant power struggle, every person in Yokohama is constantly using their ability to either exist or fight off any threat that comes in their way. However, this isn't the case for Fyodor. His ability, Crime and Punishment, has never been explained in the entire series, although it has been shown to maybe have the ability to kill anybody with a single touch, but hasn't been confirmed. And not only that, but for someone who wants all the gifted dead and to overthrow the major powers in the city, he only used his special ability Crime and Punishment in only two situations, where it didn't really affect his plan at all. So basically Fyodor was organizing and executing his plan of fighting ability users without his ability at all. Instead, he was using his superhuman intellect, where he not only surpassed, but completely outsmarted the two greatest minds we've seen in the series until that point, which are Dazai and Rampo. Another few examples of how insane Fyodor's intelligence was the method he used to communicate with his followers from the Rats in the House of the Dead. He was communicating with them through the frequency waves in music being played, which literally is the last thing any detective agency would have even thought was happening. Or another situation when he memorized all the faint scratches and differences on the back of an entire deck of cards in under 2 minutes, a method he eventually used to convince one of the Port Mafia executive members to commit suicide. Now, with all this perfect planning and flawless execution, eventually all three factions and other outside members worked together, and eventually Fyodor was captured and arrested. But with that being said, allowing himself to be captured like that was obviously all part of his plan, because this is not the first time he's been captured with the intent of being captured. So it's safe to say that the demon Fyodor will be back in the Decade of Angels arc in the manga. One of the most intriguing things about Fyodor is how naturally sinister and cruel he is, especially when you compare him to, say, the Port Mafia, who's notoriously known for murdering, destruction, and chaos. And believe it or not, the Port Mafia does have a soul at the end of the day, and they have limitations when it comes to violence, especially if it would harm the citizens of Yokohama. But Fyodor is a different breed entirely. Not only does he not care for the people of the city, or anyone for that matter, he actually used the children of Yokohama and forced them to fight and die for his cause, all to break the armed detective agency both physically and mentally. And we saw how effective this was when it almost completely broke down the acting leader of the agency. He showed how terrifying his skills to use people is, and how his level of brainwashing can almost be considered one of the greatest talents in the entire series. And to give an example of how broken this talent truly is, was when he used the guild executive member, Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was suffering after his girl died from saving him and he was at a really low point. And Fyodor so easily talked him into joining the rats and eventually brainwashed him to the point where his only purpose was to obey Fyodor's orders, which is something all members of the Rats in the House of the Dead have in common, which is that extreme loyalty towards Fyodor where they put his life and goals before their own. And this is a result of his dark, charismatic nature. Fyodor will go as far as to use any means to purge all the gifted people from the world because of their sinful nature. But at the same time, he also believes that everyone is a sinner that deserves to be punished, and since he was gifted with crime and punishment himself, he believes it's his duty to kill any human who tries to interfere with his divine judgment, which is a major sign of a god complex. And finally, like all characters in Bungou Stray Dogs, Fyodor was named after the Russian author, and his ability is his most famous book, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And that, fellow weebs, is the perfect mind known as the Demon Rat, who definitely earned his seat on the Villain Mastermind series. Hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to comment which anime villain should be featured on the next episode of Villain Masterminds, and if you like anime and manga in general, hit that like and subscribe button to help support the channel. And also, link to my other socials are in the description. See y'all in the next video.